The real cost of everyday life in Ho Chi Minh City. How much money would you really need to live alone in Vietnam? Is 500 a month enough? What about 700s? Could you actually live comfortably on less than $1 in Zarazan? These are questions I hear surprisingly often. People imagine Vietnam as an incredibly cheap country where you can rent an apartment, eat delicious food every day, drink coffee, travel around, and still have plenty of money left over. There is some truth to that, but the reality is more complicated. The cost of living in Vietnam depends enormously on where you live, how you eat, what kind of apartment you choose, how often you use air conditioning, how much you travel, and perhaps most importantly, what you consider comfortable. Living alone in Ho Chi Minh City has taught me that the cheapest life and the best value life are not necessarily the same thing. You can spend very little if you're willing to sacrifice comfort. You can also spend surprisingly much without realizing where your money went. So today, let's forget the exaggerated numbers you sometimes see online. Instead, let's walk through a realistic day of living alone in Vietnam, from waking up in the morning to going to bed at night, and look at where the money actually goes. 1. The biggest expense: your home. For someone living alone, housing is usually the first major expense. In Ho Chi Minh City, the price of an apartment can vary dramatically depending on the neighborhood, size, age of the building, furniture, security, parking, and access to transportation. You might find a simple studio or small room in a local neighborhood for a relatively modest price. Move closer to central districts, choose a newer building, add an elevator, security, a gym, a swimming pool, a balcony, better furniture, and modern appliances, and the price can increase quickly. This is where many people make their first mistake. They hear that Vietnam is inexpensive and immediately choose the cheapest accommodation they can find. But saving money on rent isn't always saving money. A cheap apartment far from your daily activities may mean spending more on transportation. A poorly ventilated apartment may require air conditioning constantly. An old building may have higher maintenance problems. A location without nearby markets may force you to order food more often. For me, location is one of the most important parts of the budget. I would rather live in a modest apartment near a local market, coffee shops, restaurants, and a park than live somewhere more luxurious, but far away from everything. When everything you need is within walking distance or a short motorbike ride, your lifestyle naturally becomes cheaper. Electricity can surprise you. Rent isn't the only housing cost. Electricity can become surprisingly important in Vietnam, especially during the hottest months. Ho Chi Minh City is warm throughout much of the year. If you live alone and use air conditioning for many hours every day, your electricity bill can increase substantially. This is one reason I don't automatically turn on the air conditioner every time I feel warm. In the early morning, I open the windows. I use a fan when the weather allows it. I spend some time outside at a coffee shop or in a park. Then, when the afternoon heat becomes uncomfortable, I use air conditioning more strategically. The goal isn't to suffer to save money. It's to understand where the money is going. A comfortable home is important, But comfort doesn't have to mean keeping the air conditioner running 24 hours a day. 3. Food. Where Vietnam can be surprisingly affordable, food is probably the easiest part of the budget to control. Vietnam has an enormous range of choices. You can eat at an inexpensive local restaurant, cook at home, order delivery, visit a shopping mall, or eat at an international restaurant. The difference in price can be enormous. A simple Vietnamese breakfast can be relatively inexpensive. A bowl of pho, a bì nu, a bowl of HTU, sticky rice. A local noodle dish. You don't need to spend a lot to have a satisfying meal. Lunch can be just as affordable if you eat where local workers eat. And that's one of my favorite rules. Look at the customers. If a small restaurant is full of local workers, delivery drivers, students, and office employees, there's a good chance you're looking at food designed for everyday life rather than tourists. 4. Cooking at home versus eating outside. Living alone creates an interesting problem. Cooking can save money, but cooking for one person isn't always as economical as people imagine. You buy a large bag of vegetables. You use half. The rest sits in the refrigerator. You buy several ingredients for one recipe. Then you don't use them again. Eventually, food gets thrown away. So I don't believe that you need to cook every single meal to live cheaply. Instead, I mix the two. I might have breakfast outside, eat a simple lunch, then cook dinner at home. Or I might prepare rice and vegetables at home while buying a simple protein from a nearby restaurant. The best system is the one that minimizes both spending and waste. Living alone should be simple, not another full-time job. 5. The morning market can save you money. One of the biggest advantages of living in Vietnam is access to traditional markets. You can buy vegetables, fruit, eggs, meat, seafood, herbs, and many other ingredients in small quantities. That's perfect for someone living alone. You don't necessarily need to buy a huge package. You can buy enough for today's dinner. Maybe 2 tomatoes, a handful of herbs, some vegetables, a few eggs, a piece of fish, a small amount of fruit. This is one of the reasons I enjoy traditional markets. They allow me to shop according to what I actually need. And there's another advantage. Food is often seasonal. When something is abundant, it tends to be easier to find and often more affordable. Learning what is in season can be an easy way to improve both your diet and your budget. 6. Vietnamese coffee, small expense, big habit. Now let's talk about one of the easiest ways to accidentally increase your monthly spending. Coffee. Vietnamese coffee itself can be inexpensive, but one coffee every morning doesn't sound like much. Then another in the afternoon, maybe a dessert, maybe a snack. Maybe you order delivery because you're already sitting at the cafe. Suddenly, a simple daily habit becomes a significant monthly expense. But I don't think the answer is to stop drinking coffee. Coffee shops are an important part of Vietnamese social life. For someone living alone, they can also provide a sense of community. Instead, I simply become more intentional. Some mornings I make coffee at home. Other mornings I go to my favorite neighborhood cafe. The important thing is knowing that you're spending money because the experience is worth it, not because you're doing it automatically. 7. Transportation. Transportation is another area where living in Vietnam can be relatively affordable. For daily life in Ho Chi Minh City, many people rely on motorbikes. A motorbike gives you enormous freedom. You can visit a market in the morning, stop at a cafe, go to work, meet a friend, and return home without spending much on each individual trip. But there are still costs: fuel, maintenance, parking, occasional repairs, and of course, the value of your time. If you live in a location where you can walk to the market and nearby restaurants, you may save money without even thinking about it. This is why I keep returning to the same point. Where you live affects almost every other part of your budget. Internet and phone bills. Modern life requires connectivity. Internet is important whether you're working, watching YouTube, communicating with family, or simply managing your daily life. Mobile data is also relatively important when you're constantly moving around the city. These expenses are usually predictable. That's good. I like predictable expenses because they make budgeting easier. The biggest financial problems often don't come from predictable bills. They come from small purchases that happen repeatedly. 9. The hidden cost of convenience. This may be the most important lesson I've learned. Convenience costs money. Ordering food is convenient. Taking a car instead of a motorbike is convenient. Buying bottled drinks is convenient. Shopping online is convenient. Going to an expensive cafe is convenient. None of these things are necessarily bad. The problem begins when convenience becomes your default setting. One evening, you're tired. You order dinner. The next evening, you're busy. You order again. A few days later, you don't want to go to the market. Another delivery. At the end of the month, you wonder where your money disappeared. It didn't disappear. You exchanged it for convenience. Once you understand that, controlling your spending becomes much easier. 10. Entertainment doesn't have to be expensive. One of the things I love about living in Vietnam is that entertainment doesn't always require spending much money. You can walk around a park, sit beside a river, visit a local market, drink coffee, watch the city at night, exercise outdoors, explore a different neighborhood, take your motorbike somewhere you've never been. Sometimes the activity costs almost nothing, and yet those are often the moments I remember. Living alone has taught me to stop equating entertainment with consumption. You don't always need to buy something to have a good evening. What about a comfortable budget? So what does comfortable actually mean? That's where every person's answer becomes different. A person who cooks most meals, lives in a modest apartment, walks frequently, uses a motorbike, and enjoys simple entertainment may live comfortably on a relatively modest monthly budget. Someone who wants a modern apartment in a central location, he eats at international restaurants, frequently uses ride-hailing services every day, spends heavily on cafes, and travels often will need considerably more. There isn't one universal number. Instead, think in categories: housing, utilities, food, transportation, communication, healthcare and personal expenses, entertainment, savings, unexpected expenses. That final category is important. Don't build a budget where every dollar is already spent. Life will eventually surprise you. A broken appliance, a motorbike repair, a medical bill, a trip home, an unexpected family expense. Having an emergency buffer gives you something more valuable than money. It gives you peace of mind. 12. A simple example of a day. Imagine a normal day living alone in Ho Chi Minh City. You wake up early. Instead of turning on the air conditioner immediately, you open the windows and drink water. You walk for 30 minutes. You stop at a local breakfast restaurant. After breakfast, you return home and work. For lunch, you eat a simple local meal. In the afternoon, you work from home or visit a neighborhood cafe. In the evening, you buy fresh vegetables from the market. You cook dinner. Afterward, you take a walk through the neighborhood. You don't go shopping. You don't order unnecessary food. You don't spend money simply because you're bored. At the end of the day, you've eaten well, exercised, worked, socialized, and relaxed. And none of those things required a luxurious lifestyle. That's what I like about Vietnam. A meaningful day doesn't have to be an expensive day. 13. The biggest mistake. Comparing yourself to others. There is another financial lesson that has nothing to do with prices. Comparison is expensive. You see someone living in a beautiful apartment. You want one? You see someone eating at an expensive restaurant. You feel like you're missing out. You see someone traveling every weekend. You wonder why your life looks less exciting. Social media makes this worse. But most people only show the parts of their lives they want you to see. Living alone has taught me to ask a different question. Does this actually make my life better? If the answer is yes, spend the money. If the answer is no, keep it. That's a much healthier way to think about money. 14. Saving money without feeling poor. Saving doesn't mean eliminating everything enjoyable. That usually doesn't work. Instead, choose what matters. Maybe coffee is important to you. Keep it. Maybe you love eating Vietnamese food. Enjoy it. Maybe you want to travel once every few months. Save specifically for it. Cut the expenses that don't matter. Keep the ones that bring genuine value. The goal isn't the cheapest possible life. The goal is the best life you can build with the money you have. Final reflection, so, how much does it really cost to live alone in Vietnam? The honest answer is it depends. Vietnam can be very affordable, but it isn't automatically cheap. Your housing choice, eating habits, transportation, entertainment, and spending discipline will determine your actual cost of living. But after years of living alone, I've discovered something more important than the exact monthly number. The quality of your life doesn't depend entirely on how much you spend. Some of my best days cost very little. A morning walk, a bowl of pho, a cup of coffee, a conversation with a market vendor, cooking dinner at home, watching the sunset, walking through a quiet neighborhood after the rain. These things may not look impressive on a bank statement, but they can be incredibly valuable. Living alone has taught me that financial freedom isn't necessarily about becoming rich. Sometimes it's simply knowing what you need, knowing what you don't need, and having enough discipline to choose between the two. And perhaps that's one of the greatest advantages of living in Vietnam. You don't need a luxurious lifestyle to experience a rich one. Sometimes a simple apartment, a local market, a motorbike, A good bowl of noodles and a peaceful evening are enough. The real luxury isn't spending more. It's having enough control over your life to enjoy what you already have.